Hey everyone, it's Bree Kane here. In one of our Zoom classes, we did an exercise where we shared a story that influenced our work, and I shared one without realizing how much it actually had influenced my practice today. I thought it was a nice gesture, so I think that's where I'll begin. It was 2003, maybe, at my grandparents' river cottage in the humid summer, with crickets chirping and fireflies lighting up. Off the dock, there are two rocks, little islands for turtles, and a mimosa tree that drops pink pom-poms, which float in the water. My cousin and I used to make pottery from the clay found in the water by that tree, until one time she got leeches, and I became too afraid. My grandpa Jim was always fishing off the dock. He made fishing poles from bamboo and lures from old broomsticks. I wanted to catch a fish, but I didn't like the idea of using a cut-up worm. I got a small piece of white bread, balled it up, and put it on the hook. I caught a huge catfish. All 12 of us would pile into the two-bedroom, one-bathroom house, fighting over the porch, which had two beds in the same room as the dinner table, and a couch, but it had the best view, and you'd wake up to Grandma clashing dishes and the smell of breakfast. Now that the family has grown, we have resorted to staying in the neighbor's house, renting an RV, and even pitching a tent. To get here, we used to have to drive down a tiny dirt road, the road where I sat on my mom's lap and gripped the steering wheel, pretending to drive. There were wild blackberry bushes where we used to collect bucket loads of berries for cobblers and crisps, but not without wounds from the thorns. We would always make blackberry and blueberry jam from the orchards nearby, where we would spend days picking. This is where my family gathers almost every July. Some of the aspects of this story that are pulled into my work include family, preservation, fishing, food, and memory. In 2016, we had a tomato canning production at the River House, and this video is the most recent thing I've made while in quarantine. It uses footage I shot in 2016 and audio from a Zoom recording I had with my grandmother the other week where I showed her the video.
I never wanted to see that canner. After Jim died, I thought the first thing I'm getting rid of is the canner. I had no idea. I had it at the river in the attic. I thought, well, that's one thing that's going to go. Because I was telling him, when we were first married and living in a hot upstairs apartment, he had a garden in the river bend at the Yadney River with my landlady that we rented from. And we grew tomatoes and so forth. And I'd come home from work and I'd can with him. We'd can at night after working all day. And I thought, I'd never done this before in my life. Never. I mean, we didn't can. My parents didn't. And I thought, what am I getting into, But, I love fresh food. I got into it, but I had a sour beginning, and then we did do a lot of canning through the years. And I just thought that was so great that I still had that canner, and y'all, it was rainy some, we had nothing to do, we did a lot of conversation, a lot of togetherness, and I know Scott and Abby and them, they really got into it, and all the men did. We didn't even that thing didn't even blow up. I kept seeing it used to blow up occasionally. Okay. And I was still afraid it would blow up sometime while we were canning. Yeah. And I was sort of hoping it would.
Here are images from two bodies of work I made in 2018, where I went back to places I spent a lot of time as a child. The images on top are from my elementary school, and the three images on the bottom are from the church where I used to have piano lessons. I didn't have any images of these places, and I wanted to go back and create an archive from what I remembered and the memories I had there and place myself in the past. I was interested in what you really remember and what you remember from a photograph, or if you're just remembering a photograph. I wanted these new images to stand in place for archival images that may have existed. I began photographing my family also in 2018. Here's an image of my grandmother on her 90th birthday. I spent a weekend with her in Charlotte, North Carolina, which I hadn't done since I was probably a child. The images from the beginning of this slideshow are also from that time I spent with her. I photographed her living space and her cooking and the lake cottage as well. This was a really busy time. I was traveling almost every weekend for over a month to photograph. This is my grandmother's house in Charlotte and her clothesline in the backyard. I went to Silver Spring, Maryland, where my sister was living at the time to photograph her and her space. And I also went to Raleigh, North Carolina, where my parents live and where I grew up to photograph our house there. These are images from my sister's house. Flash forward to 2019, I photographed my sister at her new place in Tacoma Park, Maryland, with her husband. They had recently gotten married over the summer. My family and I were staying at her place for the weekend together, and I wanted to document this time of them settling into their new place and us experiencing it for the first time. It's interesting looking back at the old images I took of my sister and this new environment and how my style had changed. I incorporated more portraits and some setup images as well. I photographed food. This is a project in 2018. I felt like food was a big part of my family, and I focused on Chalkawinity, a small town in North Carolina. I went to restaurants, fish markets, and photographed the landscape as well. I set up still lives with strawberries and collards from the North Carolina State Farmers Market in Raleigh, where I grew up going as a kid. My mom and I would sample all of the different peach stands, but still got them from the same place each time. I made a zine based on communication and collaboration through mail and letter writing. I sent friends and family letters asking them to write back and send something else along. I received a feather, a tea bag, origami, photographs, and scanned the letters, envelopes, and items and made them into this book, along with a stamped postcard that I had made. I wanted to encourage letter writing as a form of communication and collaboration, and it's something that I've been in love with since I was a child. All of these projects led into my thesis work, which focuses on family, food, tradition, and letter writing as well. My family and I were all sitting around the table after breakfast, and they were talking about their trips to Maine they used to take in the summers before I was born. My grandmother asked my cousins what they remembered, and then turned to me. I told them that I wasn't even born yet, but my aunt and grandma were convinced that I was there. I found their false memory to connect perfectly with what I was trying to convey in my thesis work, and we ended up getting a photograph out for proof that I wasn't there. I decided to have them all write me a letter about their memories from Maine so I could use them as inspiration in my work and to see the discrepancies between all of the stories. I hope to write my own story combining bits and pieces. Here is an image of muscadine and scuppernong grapes. My grandpa and I used to pick them at the beach, and I always thought they were the most strange fruit, with really thick skin that's sour and a sweet inside. I turned this image into CMYK screen prints, which layer cyan, magenta, yellow, and black ink. Layering is a large part of my work because it allows for chance and it connects with the cumulative process of memory and its tendency to misrepresent information. All of the CMYK screen prints are unique in their own way. Sometimes the ink doesn't get pulled through all the way, or sometimes one layer is darker than another. Each image is slightly different, just like the memories that my family has from Maine. Here are my canned photographs. I took inkjet prints that I made. These are from the lake cottage, and I put them in a jar of blackberry jam, boiled them, and sealed the lid. I let them sit for 2 weeks, removed the photographs, and let them sit for a few more weeks to dry. I found them with sugar crystals that had formed on the top of the images. Here is an image from my family's trips to Maine and some of the letters that I received from them about their times there. I like to think of my work as a collaboration with my family, photographing them, their space, their food, and using their memories, words, and photographs mixed in with mine. Here is a letter from my cousin Elizabeth about their times in Maine. I'd like to finish by reading part of her letter. I remember the family cooking lobsters and learning how to eat them. We would eat boiled corn and potatoes too. We would clean up, the kids, after dinner, collecting dishes, wiping the tablecloths, and we had a dishwashing assembly line outside. Two buckets, with one with soapy water and a sponge, and the other for rinsing, and one with towels to dry. We would get bitten by fire ants as we washed the dishes, so we hustled through, clean up as fast as possible. The nights and rainy days, we would play cards and charade type games, sometimes acting out TV, books, and sometimes events of the day. Cackling after lighting fires without the flint of the box, and they would send us in by peeing over the fires to put them out. The fires we built were huge, or seemed so at the time. We would spend a lot of time telling ghost stories and funny jokes around the fire. I would change seats the hotter or cooler I got. I remember fondly taking breaks from the fire to sit further away on a rock, facing away from the light of the fire to stargaze, feel the cool breezes, and stare at the town across the water lit up in the distance. Thank you.